However, this particular pericope, because we know what that means now, has a tendency to give people a loop. So we're going to probably spend the whole time on this. If not, I have prepared the first half of chapter 9 for us to go over. Okay? So we'll see how it goes. So let's pray. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for sending more seasonable weather to us, for us to enjoy this day. We ask that you bless this time, that we can learn more about you and maybe forget some of the politics that we talked about earlier. All these things we ask in the holy precious name of Jesus. Amen. Okay, so this story should sound really familiar. It comes up every 3 years, once every 3 years in the 3-year lectionary. There can be some sensitive topics that come up with this. There's nothing that you're going to say that's going to make me uncomfortable because I've heard it all. Okay? So speak up whenever you want to. All right, so verse 40. Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. And there came a man named Jairus, who was the ruler of the synagogue. And falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house, for he had only a daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. Okay? So, that doesn't really seem to be that much in that section. Is there anything in there that made you think of something else that we've already talked about in Luke? I'm hoping so.
Yeah, the centurion.
The centurion, very, very good. If no one else gets a gold star, that's a gold star for you today. I gotta wait, okay? It's too early, it's only the first 5 minutes. So,
Are you rationing now?
well, a little bit. I mean, if you're too liberal with the gold stars, then people expect them for every answer. That's not how it works. Okay. So if we compare and contrast this with the centurion that I believe is in chapter 7, I think it's the first. Yes, chapter 7, verses 1 through 10. Okay, we have the centurion. Centurion, we know, is Roman, not Jewish. It's important to remember that, like, the centurion is part of the biggest army in the world, most powerful. He's coming to Jesus. We've talked about all this stuff before. Okay, so if we compare and contrast that with Jairus, this is a completely different story, because before it was about politics, power, army stuff, okay? Now we have Jairus, who is the ruler of the synagogue. The centurion was just nice to the Jews. He gave them money for the temple. Now we have someone who's like actually in spiritual authority with the Jews. And even though spiritual authority sounds like power authority, they are very different. Okay? Anything else?
It says the ruler of the synagogue, the layman responsible for the local house of worship.
Yep.
So he's not like high up in there.
I mean, he's high up. I mean, he's the ruler. The ruler is like, you have to be in charge of something if you're the ruler.
Okay.
If I'm assuming you're reading out of the Lutheran Study Bible, if you want to do it that way, which is not normally the way that I would interpret it, is that would make him like an elder, a layman who's in charge of something, right? Okay, so we have someone else falling at the feet of Jesus. Can we remember someone else who fell at the feet of Jesus? So far in Luke, we had, pardon?
The woman that bled.
Yes, and that's in this story, we're just not there yet. Okay, so go ahead. Mary Magdalene, even though she's not, is she mentioned as Mary in this gospel? I think it's in John, where it mentions her as Mary Magdalene. This one, I think she's just a woman that falls at the feet of Jesus and washes Jesus' feet with her hair. Okay? So we've already gotten that story. We've done that. So we have two comparisons to two pretty strong other pericopes in this book. Okay? So if we're going to start this, well, here, I'll do that later. All right. So verse 42b. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him, and there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, "Who was it that touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowd surrounded you and are pressing in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that power has gone out from me." And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling, and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him, and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns?
I just find it strange that he felt power go out of him.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, I think it's an odd phrase to say.
Yeah.
It's an odd phrase to hear. I had power go out of me. What does that even mean?
And you picture he knows everything, so
Right?
he should know that. Why is he asking who? I mean, I think he's asking so that they announce themselves.
Yes.
You know,
well,
and
yes.
so he can explain to the people.
Yeah.
You know, but
Mhm.
I think that I think he knew, and I don't know if the power went. I don't think he meant the power went out of him.
Yeah,
I
put it in
think-
terms that were understandable.
Yeah.
I think that it's always best to interpret. How can I say this? The two statements that you just made are contradictory to each other. Okay? So the first time you said, "This is weird that he said this thing," and then the second thing you said was, "I don't think he really meant that. I think he meant something else." Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah.
So, when Lutherans interpret the Bible, we try as best we can to interpret things for what they are first, and then worry about maybe what they necessarily mean on another step. And I can go through the three levels of interpretation for you, but they have a tendency to get very complicated very quickly. They're delineated in a book by James Phelps called "What Does This Mean?" And we had to read that in one of our first classes at the seminary. And the phrase that goes around campus is, "What does this mean?" Because we can't understand. Because it's all about percussionary and illocutionary force and all these things that people don't talk about ever, right? So I'll give it to you really quickly, the three levels of meaning. And if I studied that book before I did this would make more sense. I'm doing this off the top of my head. The first level is what it is. Second level is what it means. And the third level is what you want it to mean. And there's actually really good ways that couples that are married can talk about these things, because I believe that most marital arguments start over these three meanings of what a phrase means. So if I say, I'm making this up off the top of my head. right? And I would never say this, A, because I don't like sandwiches, so this is not something that like happens in my house, okay? If I tell my wife, make me a sandwich,
You would say please.
well, right. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to give like a basic example, right? So if I say make me a sandwich, what's the first level of communication with that?
You want a sandwich.
I would like a sandwich, right? I don't want anything else. I want a sandwich. What does this sentence actually mean?
I'm hungry.
I'm hungry. Okay? And what do I want it to mean?
I want a sandwich, but I don't want to make it.
I want a sandwich, but I don't want to make it, and actually I want you to make it and bring it to me. Right? So what happens between men and women, because men and women's brains work differently, do we know how men's and women's brains work differently? Do you know the biology of it?
There's rational and irrational.
Do you know the biology of it though?
No.
No? Okay. So we know that there are two sides to our brain, right? The left side and the right side. And what do you know about the biology of the left side of the brain? The left side
That
is
brain is
logical.
artsy, isn't it?
Analytical.
Analytical. Good. And the right side is emotional. Okay? Now, the difference between men and women is that you have a little thing that connects the two sides of your brain called your corpus callosum. Okay? In men, the corpus callosum is really small. It is hard for men to connect emotions and logic together. It is physically, we are almost physically incapable of doing that. Okay? Women's corpus callosum is huge. Women are actually smarter than men because you can connect logic and emotion in a way that men cannot. So when at women, if you ever think that we are trying to trick you into doing something, we're actually not smart enough to do that. Because men are always thinking this. Always. When I say make me a sandwich, I'm saying I want a sandwich. That's all I'm saying. Right? I'm not saying I think you're lazy because you haven't made me supper yet, so go in the kitchen and make me a sandwich. I'm not thinking that. I'm thinking I just want a sandwich. Right? But then it gets interpreted. You're laughing because you know it's true. It gets interpreted as, what, you don't think I do anything around here? I'm so tired from doing this, that, and the other thing. I wasn't saying any of that. Right? So, when we say, when Jesus, what was it? I felt power go out of me. What is he actually saying?
He felt power go out of him.
He felt power go out of him. What does that mean?
He has less.
He felt something happen
Yeah.
on a physical level, which makes it more real, and it's harder for us to explain away by saying, I don't think it meant what he said.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Okay? So what does Jesus want that phrase to mean? You said it before. He wants the person who did that to come out and say something. That's what he wants it to mean. Okay? So, men, we're like, you felt power come out of that. It's the answer. Right? It is the answer but there's probably a little bit more to it as well. Okay? So, very sorry.
So I have a question.
I have an answer
Um,
about biology or about.
no. Peter said that the crowd was rushing in on him.
Yes, good. Which verse is that? Verse 45.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Why didn't Jesus feel anything go out of him when they touched his garment?
Because
Was
they
it
weren't
only
healed.
because she was
They
sick?
weren't seeking healing.
Does that answer your question?
Not really.
Okay, so you ask it again.
Why just this woman? Was it just because she needed the healing? No one else in that crowd needed anything?
Well, I mean, so that's Peter's whole point, right? How can you sing, because he knows number 3,
Okay.
right? And he's like, well, what? How can you say that? There's 20 people that touched you in the past 3 seconds.
Maybe she was the only one that was asking for healing.
Had the faith.
That had the faith for it, that needed it, that, I mean, there's no way that we can ever know because the text doesn't say, right? But we can know that there is something special about this woman, and we can interpret that as faith. So you get in trouble with that when you say, well, how come I haven't been healed? Or how come someone else hasn't been healed? Right? They need more faith. It worked for the woman. Why didn't it work for this person? Right? And so that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to say, well, she just had faith and so it worked for her. Because that's not necessarily how it works with us. Does that make sense?
Well, wasn't that like, was it James that was crippled?
Yeah.
And they asked, why haven't you healed me? You've healed all these other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they
Disciples.
When was that? Am I missing it?
He was one of the apostles, and he traveled with them, and he was asking Jesus, why have you not healed me? You've healed all these other people.
I don't remember that.
It was before before he spread them out.
Yeah.
Well, look it up and then let me look it up. Because I don't remember when that happened.
Google. You got a Google one?
Yeah, Google that.
You Googling it?
Am I the only one that doesn't remember? No? Okay. Okay, what else is in this section though?
I mean, the whole reason he's going where he's going is because Jairus asked him to go see his daughter, who was dying.
Right. So, what is going on right now?
Jairus knows
Knows what?
who he is.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, but
Two
he's,
So,
she's,
so we have over here, we've got Jairus coming to Jesus, right? And saying, I need you to heal my daughter. I don't know if that's enough. And so then Jesus comes. And then what happens?
He heals the woman.
She
He's not healing Jairus' daughter.
He's healing some
He's healing someone else along the way.
Yeah.
So this is called an interruption of the story. Okay, and because we've heard this story before, what's going to happen in the next paragraph?
She
we're gonna
dies.
finish the story.
What?
We're gonna finish the rest of the story.
Right, but what story?
The daughter
The
was
original.
healed.
We're gonna go back. Oh, yeah, I don't like this marker. This doesn't work well. We're gonna go back to Jesus and Jairus' daughter. So, preachers love this text because it sets up a natural sermon. Okay? When pastors are writing sermons, and I try to do this, but I don't always do this because it gets too hooky, and then you know what I'm gonna say, and I don't like it when you know what I'm gonna say before I say it. Is that you have an intro, and then you have your body, and then your conclusion says the same thing as your intro. That's called a frame sermon, because you frame the body around the central concept. Okay? And it's the same thing that's happening with this pericope, is that we have the introduction of Jairus, which is the same as the conclusion of the story. And in the middle, we have a completely different thing. So preachers love this because they're like, oh, I can start with the healing, I can end with the healing, and then talk about this other healing in the middle. It's great. But commentators hate this pericope because they have to explain why this interruption even happened in the first place. And guess what?
Does it matter?
We can't, well, A, it may not matter. B, you can't explain it. C, this is the way it happened. Jesus can do whatever he wants. Right? That's hard to write, to fill a 700-page commentary by saying that. Right? So this is a really interesting pericope because we have this frame structure, and that does not happen naturally in the Bible in a lot of places. It happens a lot in the Psalms, sometimes in the Proverbs, but not often outside of that. Okay? So, here we go. What else? What else in the middle part?
Well, the woman was trembling. She didn't want to come forward.
Well, I mean, why not?
Perhaps she thought she did something wrong by touching his garment.
Okay, so we can go down that route and say that the woman was just she thought that because Jesus said something about power, that she had sinned somehow, and that she wasn't feeling like that was something that she's supposed to be doing.
Like she overstepped. Perhaps she overstepped.
In one of the other gospels.
It's in yeah.
Where actually they give more depth to the woman, come to find out she's from Sidon. Yeah, okay, so she's probably not a Jew.
So there's a possibility that she's a foreigner, right? Foreigners being in the crowd is not gonna really go over that well. Okay, so there's that possibility too. You have to look to another gospel for that. Go ahead.
She was also, for the bleeding, she was also unclean.
Okay, so you can go theological with this too and say, you know what? You go, which is probably what I would do if I were preaching it, right? She's biblically unclean. She is completely unfit to A, be in the crowd, B, even touch Jesus. Or anyone, and C, admit it in the crowd, especially if she's a foreigner. Like, how bad is that? Right?
But
So,
he still healed her.
well, okay, what's another reason?
For the healing or for her not wanting?
For her trembling.
Exhaustion.
Joy.
Exhaustion,
Joy.
joy, which would be very Lucan theme.
I think fear.
Why do you say fear?
Who touched me? Who did?
Right.
This
Like,
guy wants
like
to
the
know
master
what
wants
you
to
do.
know, like, what's,
I'm
that's,
sorry, it was me.
yeah, it's
She
that's
apologizes.
horrible.
She's the only one who touched him.
Well,
Everybody else pressed in.
the only one that he noticed or talked about, right? What's another reason?
Shock and amazement.
And what else?
Thankfulness.
Nope,
Unworthiness.
Become unhealed.
nope. What?
Maybe become unhealed. Like, geez, I did
Oh, I never thought, so
I did
he
something
can
wrong.
reverse it,
something, I did something
right?
wrong.
Yeah. I think the answer that, in the way that I read it is, the answer that I'm looking for is absolute, complete embarrassment,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm a man, I don't understand this stuff, right? Because it doesn't happen in my body. But like, I've never met a woman that is like, oh, hey, let me tell you all about this. That's not something, like, women might talk about that with, right? You know what I mean? Like, women might talk about that with other women, but they're not going to talk about that publicly, let alone to this master that just, because read what it says, right? In verse 47. And the woman saw that she was not hidden, came trembling, falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him. She had to explain to every single person there why she was healed. And that's not something that you really want to be known as public, right? So, for all of the reasons that you just said, the theological reason of being unclean, the possible being a foreigner, being a woman, being all of these things that are like not supposed to happen, it happens, and Jesus' only question is, why did power come out of me? How are you supposed to answer that? That's really, really cool. Okay?
How you answered is how they answered every step back.
What?
Except her.
Right. Well, and I mean, verse 48 is the best possible response from Jesus, right? Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. That's the only thing that she wants to. She just wants to run out of there as soon as possible and just go back to her regular life, because at the beginning, 12 years. And she had spent all of her living on physicians and could not be. She's destitute. She doesn't have anywhere else to go. Right? And we say that about what we consider to be like major problems, right? You have cancer. If you don't like your doctor, you're going to go find another doctor. You're going to do whatever it takes to get rid of this thing. And what is happening to this woman is not something that you should have to spend 12 years dealing with. Right? Like, this is not just cancer. This is like supposed to be a regular thing that happens. And it's not regular anymore. And I mean, that if you think about the physical consequences of that, right? She's literally been bleeding for 12 years. What are the consequences? You have anemia, right? Or whatever other kind of blood disorder that you can come up with. Her body doesn't have the antibodies to congeal blood, right? Like that's a really big problem, especially back then, because the doctors weren't gonna give you some antibiotic or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, this is...
But plus the isolation.
Thank you.
Because she was unclean, she had to be away.
Mm-hmm.
And so the isolation that she had to...
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't she shamed by all the people?
Doesn't
Stay away?
it doesn't say that in this gospel,
Okay.
but it would be a consequence of being unclean, right? So what happens to this woman is not only miraculous, but it is completely life-altering when we think about it in the scope of the entire gospel. When we think about it as not the main story is Jairus. This is just the interruption to the story, and yet this amazing thing happens, okay? Another reason why we can say that this is supposed to be the same pericope is because in verse 42, for he had only a daughter, Jairus, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. And then in verse 43, and there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years.
And was dying.
And was dying, right? So it's kind of odd for us to think this woman has been bleeding as long as this daughter has been alive. So what's the connection between, there is no specific connection we can make, but Luke wants us to think about, like, what does this 12 years mean to this to the Jairus' family and to this woman's family? These 12 years have looked vastly different, right? And yet, Jesus can heal this woman. We're going to see how he heals the daughter too.
I have a question.
I have an answer.
Did this woman seek Jesus for the healing?
The woman in the middle? Yeah.
Did she? She
Yeah,
was talking about
yeah.
for healing specifically? I missed last week, obviously.
No, I don't think that matters. I think that she believed that Jesus could heal her. Otherwise, she wouldn't have touched it. Why else?
Like
would
she
touch
knew
it?
Jesus was going to be there and she went there to,
I think that's the only explanation you could make, right?
or she just happened to be there.
I think they're walking. He's walking to heal Jairus' daughter.
Okay.
They're on
So
the
she's
road.
on it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise she'd be isolated.
Pastor,
Right.
Yeah.
I have a question. I hope it's not an aside, but
I like
somewhere
asides.
this week I heard that Jesus asks more questions than
Then he gives answers.
yeah.
Yeah.
He speaks in questions often.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't we have to assume that everyone is rhetorical? He knows the answer before he asks it.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So I think that it's very good practice to think that Jesus is teaching rhetorically, right? Rhetoric just means with a logic to make you think this thing, okay? So Jesus is actually using the third level more than we necessarily think, especially as modern Americans.
So when he says, "Who touched me?"
Yeah.
He knows.
Well, A, he knows, and B, he wants a response from someone.
So he's in his public ministry and he's demonstrating, he is saying, "I am he."
Mm-hmm.
And he's using this lady to demonstrate
Mm-hmm.
who he is.
Because we've heard already in Luke that word power, where does it come from? It comes from God, right? So basically he's saying, who took God's power? Some of God's power from me. Well, the only person that can have God's power is God. So Jesus is God, so he's definitely making a statement there, which I think is your point, right? Good. Good. Okay? Got it good? Comments, questions, concerns? Okay, last paragraph. When the herds, oh, no, wrong. There you go. While Jesus was still while he's speaking these words, when he is saying, "Daughter, your faith has made you well," while he's saying that, someone from the ruler's house came and said, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher anymore." But Jesus, on hearing this, answered him, "Do not fear, only believe and she will be well." And when he came to the house, he allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and the mother of the child. And all were weeping and mourning for her. But he said, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But taking her by the hand, he called, saying, "Child, arise." And her spirit returned, and she got up at once. And he directed that something should be given to her to eat. And her parents were amazed, but he charged them to tell no one what had happened.
Didn't everyone know once the girl was up and about?
She's gonna have to go back to school, right? All her friends. I was dead, but now I'm alive, y'all. So, yeah, I know, right? Like, she's gotta be so excited.
It's a deep sleep.
Yeah. Okay. What else? There's some really cool stuff here.
Well, again, when Jairus goes in and says, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but asleep," that's sleeping. He's been told that, and he believes it. And so they're going, "Silly man."
Well, and we also, I mean, I think that this happened more publicly than what we would normally consider in America, right? When someone dies in our family, we're kind of like closed in until the funeral, which is when we kind of open up our space to everyone else to let them grieve. Back then, everyone in the community would have been at the house, right? Because they all know this daughter, they all love this daughter. They're gonna be like, it's gonna be like lots of people weeping outside and crying and lamenting and, you know, like like the really, really loud stuff, right? That you hear in the Middle East. And so Jesus is saying, you guys don't do that stuff. She's fine.
Why were they laughing?
What do you think?
I think for Peter, John, and James, they should have known better. They've seen this.
No. Peter, John, and James aren't the ones laughing. It's the ones that were weeping and mourning that are laughing at Jesus for saying, "Do not weep, for she is dead, but not dead, but sleeping." So even though they right there,
Yeah.
how can I explain this?
They were laughing at Jesus for what Jesus said, not for all the people, laughing at the people mourning.
Right. So if you look at the text, normally, this is a grammatical problem, I think, that normally when you have a pronoun that can be ambiguous, in other words, there's multiple things that can stand in for that pronoun, multiple nouns, okay? That's called an antecedent, that it refers back to something else that's already happened, okay? So the antecedent of they is normally, traditionally, the noun that is closest to that pronoun, okay? So if you're reading this and you read verse 51, and when Jesus came to the house, Jesus allowed no one to enter with him except Peter and John and James and the father and the mother of the child. And all were weeping and mourning for her, but he said, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they, your question is, who is the they, right? The they is going to be all of the ones that are weeping and mourning, because that's the closest noun to that, the closest antecedent to that pronoun. Okay?
No. Because Peter, John, and James and the parents were weeping.
Yeah.
So if you go back to the people that were weeping, isn't that them?
But I think
I don't-
they put and
I don't think
separates
that
them
Peter
from
and
the other
James-
people.
I think that the Peter and John and James and the father and mother of the child, but Jesus, it doesn't say that Peter, John, and James and the father and mother of the child are weeping. I think that those are two separate constituents, which is, they're just separate parts of the sentence.
Okay.
So they laughed at him are the ones that were weeping. Because if you think about it this way, if you're crying and someone tells you the exact opposite of what you know to be true, the reason why you're laughing or the reason why you're crying, you're gonna be like, you literally don't know what you're gonna make fun of them, right? Like, you don't know what you're talking about. And they're laughing at Jesus for being so ridiculous by saying she's not dead, she's only sleeping. So,
He segregated Peter, James, John, and the father and the mother into the room, it sounds like to me.
Correct.
But then if he's talking about everyone that's weeping,
So sure, everyone was weeping.
apparently everyone already knows, right? I mean,
Yeah, they know.
Who's
he's
that?
in the house with these 5 other people and the daughter.
So they were
How
all
is he
weeping
talking
and they
to
were
all
all
people?
mourning, you're right. They were all weeping and they were all mourning. But then he put them all outside.
I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean,
They
that's-
said that only
That's
one
what.
of them came in?
Sure. Okay, so let's assume that what you're proposing is correct. Okay. If Peter, James, and John, and the mother and the father, so what I'm hearing you say is Jesus takes them inside, and after that, everything else happens inside. So it's not possible for him to be talking about everyone else outside, right? Is that what you're saying? Okay. So let's assume that Peter, James, and John are the ones that are laughing at him. Okay. What would that mean then?
I think the laughter is an expression of the absence of faith.
Okay.
And I
So
think-
theologically, it's the absence of faith.
I think, in this
Okay.
case. that-
Yeah. I think you can
To
make a
me,
very
that
strong
strikes
case.
me as-
Very strong case for that. I'm probably going to argue a different one, but that doesn't mean that you're wrong. It's probably that both of us are right. Okay? I'm probably going to argue emotional distress and say that you don't, if you're weeping that hard, you don't really have control over your emotions that well, and they can fluctuate pretty quickly, and especially if someone tells you something that you A, don't want to hear, or B, don't believe is true. Okay? So if the people that are laughing are Peter, James, and John, and the mom and the dad, it can be disbelief, it could be emotional distress. It can also if I tell you 2 + 2 = 5, and I tell you that, and you're just like, Chris, you're an idiot. You can't say that. Everyone knows that 2 + 2 is 4, right?
I would say show me.
Show me, right? And if I'm Jesus and I say, well, she's not dead, she's literally lying dead on the bed. You're gonna laugh at that because it's so ridiculous, right? So I don't think I would preach it as Peter, James, and John laughing, because I think they have shown a little bit of faith so far. And that would seem weird to me that the disciples are showing that much disbelief. But also, if that's correct, then I think that's even a stronger case for how the disciples are changed throughout the years that they're with Jesus.
To me, it reads like the immediate family is with the daughter, and it's different.
Yeah.
They're separate.
Yeah. But I never thought about it that way before. I think just because when you read it, you know what you're gonna read, and that's what you read, if that makes sense. Cool. So what else is here?
Her spirit returned.
Her spirit returned. This is really strong language for what happens after death, right? Her spirit returned. That
means her spirit left.
That's kind of Halloween-y, right? That's not what we expect. That the spirit returned, because you're right, that implies that the spirit went away. And then you have to ask yourself, well, where does the spirit go? Right? So,
And who's in control of the spirit?
And who's in control of the spirit, and all these things. That can lead you down a very non-biblical road. Okay? So let's stick to the Bible and see what it says. and her spirit returned. Okay, so that part's weird. What happened after the spirit returned? She got up at once, and Jesus directed that something be given her to eat. So getting up is a normal thing. Eating is a normal thing. Okay? So it doesn't appear that anything hyper strange happened to this girl, because if it did, what would be her first response?
Like what happened?
Screaming, being afraid, asking what happened, like whatever movie reference you want to make, right? That it seems like the rest of the story is quote unquote normal. So I don't think that that gives us enough information to go down a non-biblical path with her spirit return. Okay?
But
Yeah.
doesn't it set
Make me a
us up
sandwich.
that when Jesus and then he ate to prove that he was.
Hey, yeah, gold star. That's the gold star. Alright. You were so close. No. Okay, say it again so everyone can hear. Say it again so everyone can hear.
I don't know if I, okay, so it's set up for the people to believe that whenever Jesus had died, they saw him on the cross, he's dead, he's gone, he was buried. But when he came back to life and he entered with his disciples and he ate with them, by him eating physical food, then he was truly alive.
Okay? So eating is actually something that like proves human nature to Luke. Right? So like if she's just spirit, angels don't eat. Right? If she's just spirit, then she doesn't need to eat. But her spirit returned to her body, which makes her alive, and eating is necessary. And the same thing happened to Jesus after he resurrected from the dead, when he ate the fish by the Sea of Galilee. That is a really powerful connection. Okay? Because dead people don't eat. You don't need to eat anymore. The body can't process it, right? Which is a whole other theory on life that we haven't even talked about. That in order to be alive, you have to move. Movement is life. Right? It's true, but we don't think about it that way. Alright, so that's another thing. Parents are made, he tells people not, okay, so we have the Lucan themes of fearing, believing, being well, getting up, being amazed, charging no one to talk about it, falling down, trembling, joy, all of these like major Lucan themes that we've been studying. Of Luke that much more enjoyable when you're able to recognize these. Okay? Okay, got it good? Well, you guys were laughing about something while I was giving her rules. What was the thing?
So she came back to life and she said, "Make me a sandwich."
Well, yeah, I mean, it's more Jesus. Jesus was more like, make her a sandwich. But, yeah, that, I mean, I remember thinking as a kid, that's a really weird thing to do right after you're resurrected. As if, like, eating is going to make her feel better.
Not really. Jesus is a man. And what makes you feel better?
We got back to
Something
that
to
gender
eat.
thing, yeah, we got.
I know. Okay, so let's say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Okay, I looked up on Google about John,
James.
James. It was in The Chosen, was one of the episodes that they showed